Hey, Cersei here, bringing you another episode of Gaming Archaeology. So this one is called Bomberman Hero. As it turns out, there were quite a lot of Bomberman games on the N64. And I'm not really sure, like, there's Bomberman 64 and there's Bomberman 64 The Second Attack, which is very clearly a sequel. And then you have Bomberman Hero, which seems to be basically entirely unrelated to either of those. And I always mix them up because they have very generic titles. There's also Bomberman World on PlayStation, and Bomberman Generation on GameCube, which of course came later. Also, yes, this is very Star Wars. It's pretty blatant, honestly. And I've put all of these games on my list because despite not sounding very distinct from each other, and despite what you might think, you know, Bomberman, they're all very different from each other. They're all pretty distinct, with the most similar ones being the two Bomberman 64 games, since they're both, you know, kind of in the same series. But yeah, I don't really know if there was any Bomberman game like this one before or since. And we're gonna see a bunch of these remotes scattered throughout, which basically just teach you how to play. And I don't think that we really need to go into those too much. I mean, it's Bomberman. I've gone through the tutorial. You can just see, like, you throw bombs, you get pickups. You can hold down a bomb to, like, charge it up and turn it into multiple bombs. I don't know exactly how that works, but it's kind of cool. Okay, thanks, Bomberman robot. But yeah, there's something about this game, and I don't know if I can really quite put my finger on it, that always struck me as weird. I don't know if I don't know. There's just something about the feel and the tone of this game. I guess it's almost like there's something weirdly sparse about it. About the world it creates, and how it's very simple and straightforward, but it also has a very distinct visual style that kind of makes it stick out. And it's definitely not something I get out of any other Bomberman game. And maybe seeing it for yourself, you might get a better impression of kind of what I'm talking about. Chickens. But yeah, so this is unlike most of the other Bomberman games. It's a fairly straightforward platforming game with Bomberman's abilities. You can jump, you climb on platforms, and stuff like this. I don't know what the time frame is. Again, this is, you know, something maybe I should research beforehand, but this is something I just thought of. Is I can see them making this game as an answer. I just completely missed all that. As an answer to Mario 64. I could see Bomberman 64 being kind of the early first attempt. You know, it's more like Bomberman, where you don't really do platforming. You know, you've got an overhead view where you're running around laying bombs. This game definitely has a feel much more like it's trying to go for the more kind of 3D platforming type of thing that was really getting big once Super Mario 64 takes off. And it would definitely go to some lengths to explain why this game doesn't really seem to quite fit with the other games of its era, in terms of just terms of like in continuity of the style and the storytelling and how the mechanics work. Is if it was kind of more about they're trying to kind of pick up on the latest trends in what was getting big, and depth perception is a little off with some of these. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. But yeah, one thing we're going to see here is, so we need a key card to get in here. There are going to be areas with multiple exits, and so there are some levels that can only be accessed by taking one exit or another. So we could jump over, and how far down does this go? Where am I going? I didn't explore this area before. Okay. But yeah, so we can go ahead and explore. I didn't take this path before, but you know, to heck with it. I'm sure nothing can possibly go wrong by me venturing into areas of the game that I'm not familiar with. That has never caused anything bad to happen. Shut up. Anyway, but yeah, I'm actually really interested in to know what the idea behind making this game as it is so different from other Bomberman games. As you can see, we're getting kind of ratings on each level. This is not super important. I think it's relevant to getting like a secret ending. So you know, this is something that you'd only care about if you were playing the game all the way to the end. Yikes. Also, the physics of Bomberman's jump are a little off. As always, it's hard to tell if this really comes across just from watching. Let me get. Come on, Jesus. He has a lot of momentum in the air. Like if I jump forward and then I pull back, I just about come to a stop as he touches the ground. This can make it really hard to correct a bad jump, and sometimes results in kind of sailing into obstacles instead of going around them as you're planning. And Bomberman is a lot more responsive to the controls on the ground, which I guess makes a sort of physical sense. I mean, you aren't supposed to really be able to control your jump anyway, I guess, but there's kind of an intuitive sense that it kind of makes sense that you have more friction on the ground, as opposed to the magical invisible force by which platforming characters control their jumps. I get that, but it's very. I actually don't know if you can actually change direction in terms of like reversing your direction. I guess you can go back and forth. Oof. Yeah, it's touchy. Really, the best thing to do is just to make sure you know where you want to land before you make the jump. Ooh, that is kind of camera. Okay, so those do blow up. So yeah, there's quite a bit going on with this game in terms of like the different paths, earning the ratings and kind of unlocking the secrets. So that's kind of interesting. But you can also play this game very straightforwardly. It's a pretty simple platforming game for the most part. The platforming can get a little bit frustrating in places where it's kind of easy to fall. But for the most part, it's alright. I wouldn't say it's a really like stellar standout platforming game. But it's serviceable. It does what it does effectively and without without a lot of flair, I suppose. What is it that he actually drops from? Oh, nothing. There's just a crystal here. But yeah, this is one of the games that actually does give you a reason to care about your score, if you want to get those 5s for the rating. No, there we go. And it is kind of fun just to have free range to just blow everything up that gets in your way. The game does, yeah. So wait. Those are collect. What are those? Do I need those also for the secret ending? I don't actually even remember what these sparkly blue orbs are at all. So that's fun. But yeah, I guess mostly when you come into this game, it's mostly for the joy of blowing things up. You know, and I guess in that sense, you know, it could be kind of thought of as a very simplistic predecessor to you know, later third-person shoot-'em-up type games, and just in terms of, you know, mechanically, like having a range attack. I don't know. Is it too much of a stretch to kind of draw a comparison here between this game and like Ratchet and Clank, your Jak and Daxter and stuff like that? It does. I don't know. It does have kind of a similar feel, you know, aside from the upgrades, which obviously this game doesn't really have. I'm trying to remember if this is a safe jump. I think it is. It was not. It was not a safe jump. That's good to know. Alright, well, let's go ahead and try not waste too much time. I do wonder exactly what the angle is there. Just kind of having a blind leap that really could go either way. I am pretty sure I landed that safely my first attempt. But it's, I don't know, that seems like kind of sloppy level design. Yeah, definitely I would say the one thing that I do have, I do take issue with is this, this game's jumping physics definitely needed some, a little extra tweaking, just to make you feel more like you're in control of you know, Bomberman when he's, you know, running and jumping and stuff. Because it really doesn't feel good when you've got a character who's kind of just like gently sailing beyond the target you were going for. Oh, come on. Right, that does, Jesus Christ. I forget that you can't grab ledges when you're in a water jump. Oh man, we have to start all over again. This is suddenly not going well at all. Come on. I also feel like, I don't know, the whole thing about like collecting bomb power-ups, I kind of understand, like that's, you know, that's from original Bomberman where you collect power-ups and it makes you lay more bombs and lay stronger bombs. I don't know if I really like, I don't like the idea of losing it as a punishment. I guess in general, like, I feel iffy about games where, not doing well, oh, come on, I need a keycard, makes you weaker, and, like, if you're gonna do something like that, I think it has to be done with a lot of care, and it can very easily feel really frustrating to kind of to lose and then kind of get kicked back to a worse situation than you were in before. That's really not a fun thing to have to deal with. I'm not even gonna go for the floating platform. I don't really get. I know that's very weirdly placed. But yeah, I don't really feel like Bomberman benefits from that very much. Especially just like your firepower starts off so small when you just lose it, and you start over from 1. So that's a frustrating experience, I think. Yeah, okay. It's not that interesting. We're just getting a thing that we can use to do the thing. You know, I feel like this is definitely, I think, encapsulates a lot about my feelings about Bomberman. Is I like the music. I feel like when I'm listening to the music of this game, I enjoy it, but it's not something I would seek out. I think that really boils down. It boils down a lot of my feelings about this game. Is just when I'm playing it, I feel good to be playing it, but I don't feel a strong need to like seek it out. But you know, it's definitely unique. Like there are definitely games, like there aren't a lot of games that kind of have the same feel as it, and it's, you know, it's kind of simplistic and it's kind of flawed. But it's its own thing, and I guess like that's kind of a lot of the driving philosophy behind what I'm doing here. Is kind of trying to pull away from that search for objective best things, because even things that are kind of mediocre or, you know, not super standout often have really unique, they have their own feel. You know, sometimes it's worth seeking out just as something you're in the mood for, and sometimes it's not. But I do have a feeling that, like, if you're kind of seeking out the best things to play, and I mean, you could certainly approach, you know, games that way. It's my feeling that there are a lot of interesting, kind of quirky, weirder, or, you know, just unique experiences that you can miss out with that approach. And so that's definitely why I do want to look for games like this, and also why, like, I feel like you can find an interesting, you know, you can find a worthwhile quality in almost anything, as long as it's not boring. You know, once a game is boring, that's when it's like you don't even get like the fun of, you know, playing something that's bad. Like, you know, I in a fit of what I can only describe as a misguided sense of I don't know, a misguided sense of something. I played Bubsy 3D to the end. I beat it for some reason. Whatever sense I had at the time was definitely misguided. I will say, that game was not boring. If it was just a boring game, I wouldn't have even been able to put up with it. Just the fact that I was mad the whole time I played that game was at least an emotion, right? It's a story to tell, right? Like, there's something I got out of my very weird experience of having played and beaten Bubsy 3D. A game that doesn't give you something that other games can't provide, and it's not even necessarily something that you can put into words, or, you know, you could just, like, just the Bomberman hero-ness of Bomberman Hero is what makes it different from other games. and I don't know if I can really describe it. But I feel like there's especially a lot of that in video games, just because the aesthetics and the design of video games have been changing so fast, from year to year, that you have games that you do things that you won't see before and you won't really ever see after. Some things like that, they don't get a lot of love. The very blocky polygon aesthetics of the N64 era don't get a lot of love, and I understand why that's the case. But one thing you have to admit is that when you get to games that have better graphics and just overall look better, you no longer really have the games that have aesthetics like Jumping Flash or Bomberman Hero. Once you move beyond the NES, where you don't have to worry so much about special rendering tricks to get around the limitations of the NES hardware, you start to lose the aesthetic that grows up around working around those limitations. And in a lot of ways, you could say that it's objectively better. Like in terms of what you can do with the Super Nintendo, and its capabilities as a console, it is objectively better than the NES. But the ways that the NES and the way that the N64 and the ways each console is limited gives people reasons to work to create unique games that deal with those limitations in ways that they won't ever need to again. I've heard that red tornadoes are mean and white tornadoes are kind. Okay then. Alright. We'll just roll with that. Obviously when you read that, you know what that means, but it's a very weird thing when you actually think about it. I would not trust the advice this game gives on tornadoes. But yeah, this did basically only exist to point out this one secret, which you can kind of get. I actually don't know how I feel about this. I have to turn on a switch. It's really not that important to get the other stuff anyway. I don't know how I feel about it, just kind of like the tutorial explaining the secret. I don't know. It seems a little bit too much of a giveaway, because it's basically the only time it's ever relevant is that it's the white tornado is hiding this one secret. That's never really used again, I think. But yeah, I really think that a lot of what has drawn me to gaming archaeology as a project, and what I think draws a lot of people to retro gaming is, conscious or not, you can tell that there's something that you can find in certain eras of games that just don't exist anywhere else. And I think that the fact that these aren't the limitations and the technological changes are, of course, definite improvements, but the aesthetics that grew out of the inferior hardware is neither good nor bad. It's just different from what people produce today. And this is how you kind of start to get retro as a deliberate video game aesthetic, is recognizing that pretending you have those limitations can lead to the kinds of things that you wouldn't objectively want to produce ordinarily. And it's definitely interesting to look at it from that angle, and also to look at it from the angle of the fact that how we relate to the retro aesthetic has a lot to do with how we understand what it means for something to look like the NES or to look like the N64. And you know, people have an intuitive idea in their heads of what that means. But what's really interesting is when you actually go back and look at what the actual limitations were and how that's different from people's popular image, like how many colors you get, how many sprites you get, why and how much sprite flicker needs to be done to deal with a large amount of sprites in a game, and things like needing to kind of fake the background, you know, kind of simplify the background, or make a black background so that you can use the background for a large enemy. You know, the stuff where you have like Mega Man walks into a room and the screen goes black and Dr. Wily appears on screen, because the game needed to take away the background so that it could hide the fact that it was using the background to render the giant boss monster. And that created certain aesthetics that I think are not as obvious, the fact that they needed to do this, and it might just be seen as, you know, they want to hide the technical limitations, and that's good design, but it means that there are definite aesthetics of the NES, of these past consoles that developed for that can kind of go unnoticed. And you know, that's, I guess, where you kind of get into people wanting to actually build games on the original hardware. You know, you can't cheat the limitations. You have a circumstance where you can see what you get out of trying to translate the idea in your head into what the actual hardware limitations were. And that's definitely something that I find really interesting, and definitely a big reason why I'm interested to learn more about how the hardware works. You know, I'm talking specifically about the NES because that's what I've been studying lately. But each console will have its own limitations. You know, there are things that we probably don't understand about the N64 that you would have to study in as much detail as I've studied the NES to understand, like why the NES does certain things. And you know, like is there a reason why I'm fighting this guy in like a floaty void with a completely unique background? I don't know. Maybe it's an aesthetic choice of the game, or maybe there's a technical reason why they did it this way. You know, as an example, I don't know the answer to that. And so there are a lot of times when the technical limitations create completely unique aesthetics, and that's, I guess, why studying retro stuff is artistically valuable, just outside of just being able to play the old games. Is kind of understanding how technical limitations give rise to unique aesthetics. Man, I got really deep into like arts, tech theory stuff. Well, I've been playing Bomberman this whole time. Anyway, this is probably a good time to cut it. Whew. That was a surprisingly coherent rant from me too. Usually, I guess I do sometimes produce those off the cuff, but if I thought about this from beforehand, I might be able to come up with something with a lot less stumbling. But I never know what I'm gonna talk about when I start recording one of these. Anyway, that's about the half-hour mark. I think that's a good place to call it. I know I had kind of a big gap where I didn't really produce anything. My life was stolen from me by Persona 5 for something like good 3-4 weeks. So my apologies for that. But you know, I had no control over the Persona stealing my life. But no, I'm gonna try and get back on schedule. It's kind of bad timing that this happened right when I was trying to start getting getting started with the Patreon thing. But I am gonna try and stick to a regular or schedule, as I promised or attempted to promise before this. This is an unusual occurrence. I don't usually just get sucked into a game so hard that I just can't focus on anything else. But that was a pretty big one. And I don't know. Maybe I should like record something about Persona 5, but I'm like way behind on that. Everyone's already said their piece about Persona 5. So whatever. I don't know. But yeah. I'm not sure what's next on the list. I think that whatchamacallit? I think I've got Croc Legend of the Gobos listed after this. But you know, if my patrons want to give any input on that, as I've said before, my two patrons, Unanilium and Drakitten, if you want to send me a few bucks, if you want to tell me what game you'd like me to see me play next, you know, I'm all ears. I love getting input from people. Even if you're not going to chip in a few bucks, like, comment. If you like this video, like, I want to hear from you. I want to hear people's voices. Nobody ever talks to me. I'm so alone. No, but seriously, I love getting feedback from people. And you know, I'll figure out what's next. Obviously, the immediate next thing I'm trying to trade off between Gaming Archaeology and Beglitched, so you'll be seeing another episode of that potentially next week, depending on. I still haven't set a firm schedule, but I'm trying to get back to one video per week. So that's my plan. But yeah, if you want to chip in a few bucks, I'll put my Patreon link in the description. I'll see you next time. So, bye-bye. See y'all later.